I was personally part of missions in Gaza that were given the green light and were then unsafe, came under fire, or were delayed so long, sitting hours at a holding point, that we had to turn around and come back. And that's a daily reality on the ground for the teams.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars we end.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip. We'll own it. Know that China is doing very poorly right now. I just saw some reports coming out, and I don't want that to happen to China.
You're gambling with World War III.
I was saved by God to make America great again.
I'm Roland Oliphant, and this is Battlelines. It's Friday, the 25th of July, 2025. Today, Western governments have demanded Israel lift restrictions on aid shipments into Gaza after international aid agencies warned thousands may be about to die of starvation. We speak to a UNICEF staff member about what that looks like on the ground. But first, yesterday, a long-running border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia erupted into open conflict. As I speak, Thai authorities say at least 12 people have been killed in exchanges of artillery and airstrikes. There is not yet any word on casualties from Cambodia. Earlier, I spoke to the Telegraph's Sarah Newey about the causes of the fighting. I started by asking her where she was and what the atmosphere is like on the ground.
Yeah, so I'm still in Bangkok, where there's an awareness of what's going on, and obviously lots of journalists are racing off to various press conferences with the government and the military, but there's not a sense of panic here at all. This fighting has broken out 250 miles to the northeast of Bangkok and is quite localized at the moment. But the images that are coming out of that region of a hospital being hit, a petrol station going on fire right in front of a 7-Eleven, which you see everywhere in Thailand. So that feels a very apt image somehow for the country. Obviously, people are talking about it and concerned by it. I don't think people consider this is going to deteriorate massively and hit them here in the city, though.
One thing that strikes me, just looking at the reporting that's emerging this morning, and granted, I don't know much about this part of the world, but, we're talking about, Thailand is using F-16 jets. I'm looking at a picture right now which shows people loading a multiple rocket launch system. It looks like an old Soviet-built Grad or something. I mean, this is heavy weaponry. Sarah, what on earth is going on?
Where to start? I think let's start in May. Thailand and Cambodia have for a long time had several areas that are disputed on their border of who is in control of what. It all dates back to colonial era maps. And we've seen over time several upticks of violence, but it had been quite quiet for more than 10 years until May, when a Cambodian soldier died in a skirmish on the border between Thai troops and Cambodian troops. And this has triggered a gradual deterioration of relations between the two countries. And also a political crisis in Thailand when the Prime Minister's response, she phoned Hun Sen, who is the father of the Prime Minister in Cambodia, but really holds a lot of influence in the country. She phoned him up, and during that call, she criticised her own media and called Hun Sen uncle. There's a lot of context we can get into in a moment, but just that kowtowing to a foreign leader triggered huge anger here in Thailand and ultimately Paegongtarn's suspension. So since then, we've seen all these disputes increasing. But the real flashpoint that led to today was a week ago when 3 Thai soldiers were injured after standing on landmines on the border. Thailand accused Cambodia of laying the landmines recently. Cambodia said, no, that's a baseless accusation. They're left over from wars in the 20th century. Then yesterday, 5 more Thai soldiers stood on landmines. 1 lost their leg. And Thailand again accused Cambodia of foul play, and then decided to downgrade relations between Thailand and Cambodia and expel the ambassador and close the land border in this northeast of Thailand. And then today we woke up to news that there had been gunfire and fighting. It still isn't really clear who started what, but what we do know is that 12 Thai citizens, including 1 soldier and 11 citizens, so 12 Thai people, have died. We know that Thailand has sent F-16 jets to attack 2 military positions in Cambodia. And we know that the 2 countries are still engaged in a war of words over what happens next.
You've kind of answered this, but I was wondering if I might get you to expand on it. So as you say, this border dispute, which I'm reading goes back to a French colonial map of 1907
Yeah.
that separated Cambodia from Thailand. But this dispute has been going on for decades. So why now? Why this year has this suddenly blown up?
It's a really good question. I think a lot dates back to that May incident when the Cambodian soldier died in a skirmish, which was really unexpected and kind of came out of nowhere. I think the reason that it's simmered on for a long time is because it's played into domestic politics in both countries. And Hun Sen, who is the father of the Prime Minister Hun Manet in Cambodia, and he's been a figure in Cambodian politics for decades since the end of the war, he's been stirring the pot a little bit. He leaked this audio between him and Pagontan Shinawat, who is Thailand's Prime Minister, in which she called him uncle. She said that she criticised her own military, and that's caused outrage here and has meant that the government can't really back down when things happen on the border. I think it's triggered a lot of nationalistic sentiment. And in terms of the border, it's an issue that has tried to be resolved several times. And in the past, there's sometimes been clearer reasons as to why tensions have flared. For instance, in 2011, it flared kind of as the aftermath of Cambodia trying to register a temple that's in the disputed area as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and then taking the court case to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. And in that skirmish, about 20 people died. Really, everything now, though, dates to an escalating war of words that I think has just been made a lot worse by this deterioration in relations between Hun Sen and then the Shinawat clan, who Pagaton was the prime minister, but again, it's layers upon layers. Pagaton's the prime minister, but her dad Thaksin was the prime minister back in the early 2000s and has had a huge domination of Thai politics for a long time. He was very close to Hun Sen in the past. They've been seen as natural allies. When Thaksin was in exile from Thailand, he regularly went to Cambodia. The declining relation between the two has been mirrored by the declining situation on the border at this point in time.
What can you tell us about the specific location? Is there a particular spot where this fighting is happening? And is there, because often in these things there'll be like one particular patch of land that has one specific kind of, when we think of like Russia, Ukraine and Crimea was the big thing there. Is there a specific flashpoint here?
So some of it's related to an area called the Emerald Triangle, which is where Cambodia, Laos and Thailand, their borders meet. But the fighting today has been along 6 different points along the border. Bordering Surin is the province in Thailand. The temple where a lot of the conflict started is called Prasat Tamon Tom. And basically in Cambodia's account, Thai soldiers initiated the conflict this morning because they broke an agreement and advanced closer to that. It's a Khmer Hindu temple, 1,000 years old, and the Thai soldiers supposedly put barbed wire around its base. Thailand disputes that and says that it was started because military drones were deployed by Cambodia to surveil Thai soldiers, and not long afterwards, Cambodian troops gathered with RPGs on the border. So we've got differing accounts of how this started, but yeah, a lot of it is along 6 different flashpoints on the border in northeastern Thailand.
What does this mean for the wider region? I was actually speaking to a former Australian Defence Minister who that interview should be going out on Battlelines shortly. But one thing he said to me was, look, there hasn't really been a war in Southeast Asia since the very brief Chinese invasion of Vietnam in 1979. I suppose you could talk about the Vietnamese subsequently kicking the Khmer Rouge out of Cambodia as well. But he's kind of got a point. I mean, this is not a region that has seen massive, enormous wars for the past several decades. How volatile is this? What is the potential for escalation? And how do you think the region's big powers, I mean, I suppose China in particular, are looking at this?
I would counter a tiny bit just by saying Myanmar has had a civil war, which is obviously more contained, not between countries, but that's obviously been ongoing since 2021.
That's a good point.
But yeah, you're right in terms of large scale conflicts between nations. Again, there are a few different skirmishes in the Philippines and also in southern Thailand. There's actually an ongoing dispute on the Malaysian border, but again, it's internal. How do I think the region is responding? Well, China has already said, please stop. They've offered to help broker negotiations and called for calm. Likewise, Malaysia, which is the chair at the moment of ASEAN, which is the Southeast Asia bloc of nations, has called for negotiations and said that they're going to speak to both Thailand and Cambodia's leaders before the end of the day. I don't think there's like a big appetite here for war. I think the problem is, an analyst I've been speaking to today, because of the politics of it, it's just what is the off-ramp for each country. Thailand doesn't want to seem weak in the face of 12 people dying and 2 Thai soldiers losing limbs and more being injured by landmines. Cambodia doesn't want to back down in the face of what they see as Thai aggression over areas that are their land. The politics means that in both countries, the leaderships don't want to be seen as weak or weaker than they are right now. I highly doubt that this is going to turn into a massive war where we see tanks in Bangkok and Phnom Penh. I don't think that's realistic. But do I think that it's likely that there might be more skirmishes before this sorts itself out? Yes.
So where does the situation go from here? And are there any, you mentioned China there, but are there any well-suited mediators for a resolution? Is it China? Is it the United States?
I think potentially all of those parties. China has a significant influence in both Thailand and Cambodia. The US does too, especially at a time when tariff negotiations are ongoing, which are going to hit both countries hard. I think it's just a matter of how long the fighting goes on before it stops. Someone I was speaking to earlier said that this is probably not going to continue forever, but there is a sense of wanting a bit of a fight at the moment, and either side don't seem interested in compromise. And until there's mediation, it's hard to see Thailand or Cambodia backing down.
Sarah Newey there, reporting from Bangkok. After the break, the head of the World Food Programme has warned of a man-made famine in Gaza. Will Israel bow to international pressure to lift restrictions on aid deliveries? Welcome back. This week, 26 countries, including Britain, condemned Israel's drip-feeding of aid into Gaza, but also what they called the inhumane killing of civilians. Then the head of the World Food Programme warned of a man-made famine. Doctors of the ground have said that the famine has already started. On Thursday, the BBC issued a joint statement with AFP and Reuters saying that their journalists in Gaza are at risk of starvation too. The Telegraph is unable to get reporters into Gaza, but Tess Ingram, a spokeswoman for UNICEF, has visited Gaza several times since the war began and is in regular touch with staff members on the ground. I asked her to describe what her colleagues are seeing.
It is an absolute hellscape in Gaza at the moment, and we're watching more than 1 million children live in that hellscape every single day. You're right, I've been to Gaza 3 times, and every time I'm there, I can't fathom that the situation could get worse than what I'm seeing, but every time it has deteriorated once again, and I think it's safe to say that the current situation today is the worst that it has been since October 2023. And we also need to remember that every second person in the Gaza Strip is a child, so they're disproportionately affected by what's going on. In summary, what the teams are saying is the bombardments continue. Some of my colleagues who've lived every single day of this war say that the bombardments now are the heaviest and scariest, the closest that they've been. Almost 90% of the Gaza Strip is under evacuation orders or no-go military zones. So this remaining space for humanitarians is so limited. And then next to the bombs and the bullets which continue to kill children, starvation is threatening their lives. Families are starving. They have exhausted almost all of their coping mechanisms. Aid is so little that families are having to rummage through waste to try and find food or scavenge for food. And children really are the most vulnerable to malnutrition and starvation, but we're also seeing adults falling down with just sheer exhaustion and hunger.
And when you say the space for humanitarian activity is very confined, could you be specific? Where are those remaining spaces? Is it in places in the geography of Gaza, if you can, so we know what we're talking about if we're looking at a map?
If you're looking at a map, it's the western side of the Gaza Strip towards the south. So recently, Deir al-Balah, which is in the middle, came under a large evacuation order, and some parts of Deir al-Balah, that was for the first time, Just south of that is really kind of the remaining space for civilians. There's a place called Ambawasi, which is where families are being told to flee to safety. But as we have seen time and time again, that area is not safe. But that's the place that we're talking about now. Humanitarian operations can move into areas that are under evacuation orders, but we have to coordinate in order to do that. And sometimes our access is denied or impeded when we try to move into those places. So it's just becoming increasingly difficult.
Right, and coordinate, you mean like talk to the IDF and say, look, we're going in here, so don't drop a bomb on us.
Exactly. Yes, it's a kind of global deconfliction system that we use.
Sure. The reason I wanted to get back onto this topic, and we've been following the war since October 7th on this podcast, is that the conversation has changed. I think in the past week, perhaps, on the ground, you've been talking about this for a long time, but certainly over the past week or so, we've seen a shift in the conversation at the international level. There's a lot of talk of starvation now, and a lot of criticism, including from some close Israeli allies like the United Kingdom, specifically about starvation, not about bombardment so much as about the food situation. So there's one doctor working with the UK medical charity has said, it's not that we are close to famine, we are living it. Does that chime with what you are hearing on the ground?
The IPC, which is the global group of experts that assess food insecurity and suggest whether there is a famine, their last assessment said that the whole population is facing high levels of acute food security, with 500,000 people, so that's about 1 in 5 people in Gaza, on the brink of starvation. And it's clear now from what we're seeing on the ground that children in Gaza are starving. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, in just 48 hours this week, at least 4 more children reportedly died of starvation, and that brings the total number of children who've died from malnutrition in the conflict to 80 out of a total of 100 people. So 80% of the people who have died of malnutrition, of starvation in Gaza are children. And to us at UNICEF, these deaths are absolutely unconscionable because the aid, the food, the nutrition treatments that are needed to save their lives are sitting just a few kilometres away. And we have been warning about this for a long time. We have seen the food situation, the nutrition situation deteriorating month after month after month. Really, since the February ceasefire broke down, the numbers of malnourished children have been consistently rising. And these deaths really have been live streamed into people's living rooms around the world, and yet they continue. We fear that they could get worse if the ongoing restrictions on aid continue. To be clear, if we do reach the declaration of a famine, which we need the access to be able to collect that data and that IPC team of experts to make that assessment. But even if we get to that point, it will be too late for the dozens of children who have already starved and died painful, preventable deaths. So we can't wait for that declaration of a famine. We need to change the situation right now.
You cited starvation deaths from the Gaza Health Ministry, said to be Hamas run. Do you trust those figures? And are you able to cross-reference them? Do you think those figures are reliable?
So we cite the Palestinian Ministry of Health, which is headquartered in Ramallah. They're an agency that UNICEF has previously, even before this conflict, worked closely with on data. And yes, we do trust those figures from the Palestinian Ministry of Health.
Okay. At the political level, so this week, the UK and I think 26 or 27 other countries released a joint statement condemning Israel's what they call drip feeding of aid into Gaza, and also what they call the inhumane killing of civilians there. The United Nations says it's recorded the killing by the Israeli military of more than 1,050 Palestinians trying to get food since the 27th of May. I was wondering if you could explain or give us an overview of how those two things feed into each other. And are people simply too scared to go out to the aid trucks that are there, or is there simply not enough aid in the Strip, or both?
There's 2 things happening in the Gaza Strip at the moment. One, the United Nations aid system, led by the UN, but with many humanitarian partners and NGOs, has been sidelined. The amount of aid that we're bringing into the Gaza Strip is incredibly low. About an average of 30 UN trucks a day are being offloaded at the crossings, inside the crossings. We then have to pick them up and bring them in. So an even smaller number are coming into the Gaza Strip. What we need inside Gaza is an average of more than 600 trucks a day. And that's what we achieved during the ceasefire. It was an average of about 630 truckloads a day. So 30 is an absolute drop in the ocean compared to what's needed and what the UN is able to deliver when we are permitted to do our jobs. Aside from that, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is operating. Again, the volumes of aid that they're providing are too low, and they're also only providing food aid when a variety of aid is needed in the Gaza Strip, everything from safe water and medicine to services. We've also warned consistently that that model contravenes humanitarian principles. Basically, that it doesn't provide aid to people wherever they are with safety and dignity. And so to answer your question on how people feel about that, people feel like they don't have options, that they are faced to make impossible choices between starving or perhaps being killed or injured trying to access food at unsafe distribution sites. They're terrified. We've interviewed children whose parents have been killed or injured while trying to access aid from distribution sites. And now they are the ones forced to make the decision to go there, and they still go, even though they're frightened, because they need food for themselves and for their siblings. So we are really pushing children into very dangerous circumstances in order to get something to which they are entitled to receive safely under international law.
And this is because, forgive me if I'm wrong, so GHF, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this is an Israeli and US-backed operation. They've set up distribution centres, but people have to get to the distribution centres, and that is partly the problem.
So part of the problem, yes, is that there's only 4 GHF distribution sites. They're all in the south of Gaza. And we're concerned that that design really pushes people to move, particularly from the north of Gaza, to those distribution points in the south. And for some people, that journey of tens of kilometres is impossible, particularly if you think after almost 2 years of war, in a situation where so many people are hungry and injured, or a mother might be caring for a number of children on her own, it's very difficult to make that journey under continued bombardment. But beyond that, the distribution sites are set up in militarised zones. And so civilians are being asked to enter militarised areas to collect their rations. And children risk death and injury as a consequence of that plan.
Where are Hamas in all of this? Obviously, you're talking about you have to go through deconfliction channels with the IDF if you're moving into conflict zones, so you don't get bombed. The IDF, I suppose, control how much aid can get in. Speaking to your colleagues on the ground, I mean, what is the kind of Hamas presence? Do you have any reports from your colleagues that they are interfering with distribution, or there's guys running around with balaclavas and guns kind of getting in the way or seizing control of aid?
So the stated reason for sidelining UN aid delivery was concerns about aid diversion. But this claim, with no new evidence or specific accusations, really can't justify shutting down a life-saving operation for over 2 million people. And furthermore, no, we haven't seen any major diversion of aid under our watch. I've been part of aid distributions in Gaza, and I have seen the aid go from the truck to the place where it's needed, whether that's the place of refuge of a mother with her children in a makeshift shelter, whether that's a nutrition screening and treatment site. The aid reaches people where they need it, and I've been a part of those distributions and seen firsthand. Now, yes, there is looting in the Gaza Strip, and I think that is a clear and direct result of the deprivation that we've seen. People are obviously desperate. They don't know what's going to happen next, when the next meal will be made available to them. And so with that rising desperation, we see people doing what they need to do to survive. But I think there's a clear difference between civilian desperation and aid diversion.
Can I put to you what the Israelis are saying? So David Menson, Israeli government spokesman, speaking at a media briefing on Wednesday, said, in Gaza, there's no famine caused by Israel. There is, however, a man-made shortage engineered by Hamas. Now, too often the full story is not being told. The suffering exists because Hamas has created it. The suffering exists because Hamas has made it. And then he was responding to a claim made by the director of Oxfam, who told CNN that full-scale famine is imminent while aid is, this is the claim from Oxfam, being systematically restricted by the government of Israel. Mensa said this was a false warning. But look, he's basically saying like any shortage is the fault of Hamas here and not the fault of Israel. Do you agree with that? Or do you think he's being misleading?
I would say, show us the evidence. Show us the evidence of that wide-scale diversion, because we can show you the evidence of our aid distributions successfully being delivered to the vulnerable families that need them. So if that's the claim, then we need to see evidence of that. And we would welcome that. But we haven't been presented with that evidence.
Right. And do you agree with the director of Oxfam, an independent aid agency, not part of the United Nations like you are, says that aid is being systematically restricted by the government of Israel? Is that true? Do you agree with that?
There is one main crossing that's operating into the Gaza Strip at the moment, Kerem Shalom. And like I said, we're seeing an average of 30 UN and humanitarian aid trucks a day enter through that crossing. And even then, those trucks, once they're inside Kerem Shalom, there is a enormous, very complex process that we have to go through in order to go and pick them up and collect them. So it's very difficult at the moment to say that aid is operating in the way that it should be. It is being restricted. There are so many challenges that we face on a daily basis in trying to get the aid in to the crossing and then collect the aid from the crossing and take it to the people that need it. And we need to see those impediments lifted at scale urgently, because children are dying as a result of that, because they're not getting the food, the nutrition supplies and the water that they need that are sitting just the other side of that crossing and are able to come in through the United Nations.
So World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said on Wednesday, he's perhaps blunter than I think than you've been, to be honest. He said a large proportion of the population of Gaza is starving. I don't know what you'd call it other than mass starvation, and it is man-made. That's very clear. It's because of the blockade. And there is an opening now, but it's not enough. It's just a trickle. People are starving. I don't know why we're even splitting hairs here, talking about cause and effect, which it seems to me that he's very bluntly summarizing what you just said there. Where do you see this developing in future? Is there any prospect of that being addressed in future, of the aid blockade being lifted?
I think that it's very clear that decision sits with the authorities, and we've been calling on them again and again for many, many months now, basically since this war started, to allow the large-scale entry of aid through all available crossings. And the only period of time in which we've seen that was the ceasefire earlier this year. In fact, for most of the rest of the time, aid has been severely restricted, if not completely blocked. There was a period of 11 weeks where nothing came in at all. So I think what happens next? Well, it's clear that there are really two choices facing us at the moment. One, a deep downward spiral if the ongoing situation continues with the near complete restriction on supplies entering the Gaza Strip. We will see more children die, and we will likely see the increase in the number of children dying on a proportionate basis. More children will die faster. We're going to see that increase. That's incredibly concerning. And so the alternative then is to open the crossings. We need the international community to do absolutely everything in its power at the moment to encourage the Israeli authorities to allow in as much aid as possible of all types from all crossings, and importantly then allow it to be safely collected from the crossings, and the humanitarian agencies provided with safe pathways to distribute it to people wherever they are especially in the north of Gaza.
Tess, you talk about deconfliction, about trying to move deeper into the Gaza Strip and having to talk to the IDF to organise that, to clear a path. Could you tell us about, I know that the nuts and bolts of the conversation and how difficult it is to do it? Are they, I don't know, have they just stopped picking up the phone since the ceasefire? Or give us a sense of how that process works in I suppose, as much detail as possible.
So it's a system that humanitarian actors use all over the world. Basically, it's set up for us to help parties to the conflict meet their obligations under international humanitarian law to keep aid workers safe. And so we volunteer information about what we want to do, where we want to go, with what team, at what time, with what aid supplies, and we submit that and ask for what we call a green light to be able to move. That's it in its most simplest form, but it is a complicated process and it requires coordination live on the ground with the Israeli authorities for many, if not most, of our movements in the Gaza Strip at the moment, particularly when we're trying to distribute aid or pick up aid from Kerem Shalom and take it to the people who need it. Far too often, our requests under that system are denied or impeded. For example, in June, we made 393 mission requests, of which more than half, 212, were denied or impeded. So that means the movement was either blocked or delayed on the ground to the point where we had to abort it. I was personally part of missions in Gaza that were given the green light and were then unsafe, came under fire, or were delayed so long, sitting hours at a holding point, that we had to turn around and come back. And that's a daily reality on the ground for the teams trying to do this work. It makes it incredibly difficult, even if perhaps the aid is waiting for us to collect it at Kerem Shalom, for us to actually get there safely and then get another green light to safely leave and take it to the warehouse or straight to the implementing partner that is taking it to the family.
When they do deny your requests, do they give you an explanation why? Or is it simple no? Is it the kind of denial that will give you, allow you to tailor your next request in a certain way? Or is it simply a kind of just a blank no?
My understanding is that sometimes we are provided with a response and other times we're not provided with a clear answer of why the mission wasn't able to go ahead. But I do think that this sort of detail, I think, helps us to understand how challenging the humanitarian operation is. But to go back to what you mentioned, Tedros said, we shouldn't be splitting hairs around this. We should be focused on the fact that children are dying of starvation, and the way to resolve that issue is to bring in large volumes of aid at scale and to allow it to move through the Gaza Strip safely and quickly.
This is an issue that humanitarian organizations face in every conflict, right? But I mean, a lot of what you've said and what Tedros has said and so on, I mean, pretty bluntly critical of the way the IDF is conducting itself here. And yet to do your job, you've got to coordinate closely with them and work with them, as you've just described. I mean, how difficult is it walking that line and maintaining, maintaining cordial relations, I suppose, with the IDF officers who you've got to work with?
It's something that the United Nations does all the way around the world, and UNICEF as well, to ensure that we can bring aid to children. We coordinate and work with the parties to the conflict to ensure that we have access on the ground and that we can do our jobs, all in the name of making sure that the kids get those supplies. Sometimes it is a challenge in certain conflicts, but again, that's part of our job.
Is there any similar kind of deconfliction channel with Hamas? They are the other side of the war. They continue to fight in some form or another. I mean, and we know that because Israeli soldiers continue to be killed from time to time. Do you have to talk to them as well when you're about to move into different parts of the Strip?
UNICEF works with all parties to the conflict to make sure that we can do our jobs in the Gaza Strip. We don't have a coordination mechanism of that form with both parties. But the formal coordination through that coordination and liaison unit is with the Israeli authorities.
So the GHF the GHF stations they've attracted a lot of controversy, and partly for the reasons you've stated, but also because we have these reports of the IDF basically opening fire there and people being killed at the stations. What's your understanding of, or I don't know if you've seen or you've been in contact with people there, what exactly is going on with those incidents?
I haven't personally seen it, but UNICEF has interviewed a number of children and parents about their experiences at these sites. They describe moving through large crowds, often for long distances, towards sites where they then feel like they're unsafe. They're unsafe because they're in a large, unruly crowd. They're unsafe because they're exposed to strikes or bombardments or open fire. They see people around them being killed and injured. People have described having to hide. Children have described having to hide or having to lie flat on the ground in order to protect themselves. Children have told us about coming back injured, of shrapnel wounds, of bullet wounds. We've interviewed children who have been paralysed as a result of trying to seek aid at these sites, and one boy who subsequently died from his injuries. This is not how an aid distribution should occur. No child should die in the process of trying to get the food that they need to survive. They're being presented with an impossible choice that no child should have to make.
And from those kind of eyewitness testimonies, have you got a sense of just what on earth is going on? Is it crossfire? Is it deliberate targeting? Why is it that gunfire is erupting near these sites? Have you got any insight into that?
I don't think that we can speak to what the intentions are, but I think that it's clear that people are being killed and injured while trying to seek aid, which is not something that should ever happen. And I wish that the international media was allowed access to the Gaza Strip so that journalists like yourself would be able to report on this firsthand and not have to rely on such testimonies.
UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram there. That's all from Battle Lines for this week. We'll be back next week with a 3-part special on the Chinese military. That will be going out on Monday, unusually on Wednesday for us, and on Friday. I'll also take this opportunity to once again remind listeners that at some point this summer, we intend to do a question and answer session. Lots of you have already sent in some fascinating and frankly quite difficult to answer questions, but keep them coming. We're reading every single one, and we're hoping it's going to make a really, really interesting episode. That's all for Battle Lines. Goodbye. Battle Lines is an original podcast from The Telegraph created by David Knowles. If you appreciated this show, please consider following Battle Lines on your preferred podcast app. And if you have a moment, leave a review as it helps others find the show. To stay on top of all our news, subscribe to The Telegraph, sign on to our Dispatches newsletter, or listen to our sister podcast, Ukraine, for latest. You can also get in touch directly by emailing battlelines@telegraph.co.uk or contact us on X. You can find our handles in the show notes. This episode of Battle Lines was hosted by me, Roland Oliphant, and produced by Max Bauer. The executive producer is Louisa Wells.